weather dependent.
Do you want to take a tour?
Well, except nobody learning.
Doesn't mean you're going to learn anything from me.
Well, you at least speak the language.
Go, come round, guys.
For this first part, I am actually going to take you outside of the castle, give you a quick description of what you can see from the castle itself. Now, the big area of land that's out on the far side, that is known as the Kingdom of Fife. Now, I must stress to you all that the Kingdom of Fife is still a part of Scotland. And I have to stress that fact because one of our top questions here at the castle is that France? You laugh, but it gets asked a lot more than you would think. It is also not Ireland or Norway. They're the other two popular ones that we get. So over there, it's still Scotland. Just remember that. Now, the big body of water that separates us, this is known as the Firth of Fourth, and Firth is just the old Scots word for estuary. So this is the estuary of the River Forth. If you were to follow this out approximately 30 miles, you will end up in the lovely North Sea. And then if you were to keep going straight, then you would eventually arrive in Norway, not just over there like some people seem to think. And the town that you can see down below us, this is Edinburgh's new town. Construction begins down here in the middle of the 1760s, with the first part of it being finished in the 1820s. And quite simply, the new town was built because Edinburgh was getting too full, the old town was overfilling, they just needed somewhere else to put all their new residents, and that is why the new town was built. If you are finding yourselves getting a little bit lost when you are here in Edinburgh, because I know the fringe throws everything in crazy directions, just know that when you leave the castle and you get back onto the mile, everything down to the right of the mile is the old town, everything back down to the left is the new town. It's as simple as that. The mile just splits the city in two. But back in the castle though, you see that we have a series of guns just here. Now this is called the Argyle Battery. All the cannons that you see are just here for decoration only. They've never ever been fired from the castle. Time signal for the ship's captains who are out working on the Forth. So the theory behind it, they would hear the gun go off at 1 o'clock, means they could set the time, set their instruments, and it then meant that they were able to set sail safely. So really, it was used as a safety precaution more than anything else. But before the gun, in the 1850s, they used to use a visual time signal. And if you all look behind you, out in the distance, you'll see that big tower next to the columns. That is Edinburgh's time ball. Now around 5 to 1, the ball is raised to the top, and at 1 o'clock, the ball drops. Now there's one big glaring problem with this system, and that is the weather. You're in Scotland, we don't always have sunshine. I know that's very hard for you to believe, but we don't always have sunshine. For the rest of the year, when it is rain and wind and fog, you are out there on the Forth, and you get all those weather conditions combined. You're going to struggle to see the time ball, you won't be able to see it drop, and that is why they complained, and that is why they started firing the gun from 1861 onwards. Now, one of the questions that we do get asked at the cafe is then, do you guys do the snacks and the beverages? It's also your closest point to toilets right in this part of the castle as well, so important information right there. Now, down this hill, the bottom of Scotland, and it's in there where you'll find 400 years of Scotland's fighting and the main that going in the castle. You've got the Royal Scots, who are the oldest regiment in Scotland. You've also got Royal Scots Dragoon Guards. Now, you'll notice that on their emblem they have an eagle, and that's because in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo, and this is built at the end of the 18th century, 1799, and this was for when Edinburgh Castle was a fully functioning military garrison. So this is where the soldiers would have lived when they were stationed here in the castle permanently. It sleeps around 600 men, and this isn't even all of it. It drops about another 3 floors down below, so it's absolutely huge. Nowadays though, there is no permanent military force in the castle anymore. It is really used as now. You also get recruitment offices, regimental headquarters, military intelligence and military headquarters all run from this building now. Because this is a military building, that means there's no access to the public, but don't worry because there's nothing good in there anyway, so it's fine. Now, the hill behind me here was used during the American Revolutionary War and the Napoleonic Wars. At their peak, 1,000 men of different nationalities were crammed all inside these vaults, all at the same time. So it wasn't the nicest place to be. You'll also see that there is an exhibition which will show you what life was like as a prisoner here in Edinburgh Castle, and you will also get to see. Now, we're going to go up through the archway, and you'll be happy to know this is the last part of the hill. It's all flat once you get through here. See, a lot of you are looking behind me, but it is in fact this tiny little building right here. This is St Margaret's Chapel, and it is built in 1130 by King David I of Scotland in honour of Queen Margaret, who was his mother. She was also a resident here in the castle in the late 1000s. Now, one of the reasons why we think this is still standing to this day is because after the events of 1296, when Scotland and England were at war, Edward I of England had moved his forces here into Edinburgh Castle. They were here for nearly 20 years until in 1314 Robert the Bruce decided it was time to try and take the castle back. So he asked his finest man, Sir Thomas Randolph, to try and do exactly that. Now Randolph, with a small band of men, under the cover of darkness, scaled the castle walls, they snuck past the English guards, and they opened the front gates, letting the Scots army in and chucking the English army out. It was as simple as that. However, back in these days, if you were at war with someone, usually you had to go to wherever the fighting was. So Bruce was fearful that should he have to take his forces out of Edinburgh Castle, that the English would simply just regroup and just move back in once again. So that is why in 1314, Robert the Bruce gave the order to have Edinburgh Castle destroyed. Everything was to be destroyed, it was to be left a ruin. Basically saying that, well, if I can't have the castle, no one else can. But the one building that was left untouched and still standing was St Margaret's Chapel. And we think this is to do with the religious aspect of this building, and as well because he was the king. If he was caught giving the order to knock down a religious building, he was going to lose an awful lot of his followers and an awful lot of his support. Also, Margaret herself, she was a newly canonised saint. She'd only been a saint for the last 70 years or so. So it could have been seen as doubly bad luck if he, as the king, was caught knocking down this religious building. Now, a little bit of extra information about the chapel is that it is still a functioning chapel. So you can have baptisms in this chapel, you can also get married in this chapel, and this is a particular favourite with the father of the bride because it only seats 25 people. So it's quite popular when you get married here. Now, when you go to have a look at St Margaret's Chapel, you'll see that in front of it there is a 6-ton siege cannon by the name of Mons Meg. Now, Mons Meg came to the castle in the middle of the 1400s as a wedding present for James II because he was a bit gun crazy, so to celebrate his marriage they gave him a gigantic cannon. Unfortunately for James II, he was then killed by an exploding cannon, so there's a bit of irony in there somewhere. But Mons Meg, she was the pinnacle fortress of James and Scots fighting against each other. They were falling out of the castle, and this siege went on for 2 years. And it ended in to collapse David's Tower, which was a big tower, which you see all that scaffolding in now. National War Memorial. And the easiest way to sum this building up is that the outside is old and the inside is relatively new. So the standing structure that you see dates back to the 1750s when it was the old soldiers' barracks. The soldiers move out of here a few years after the end of the First World War, and that is when construction begins on the inside to turn it into the memorial that you see today. It opens its doors officially as the War Memorial in 1927. Now, when you go inside, you'll see that directly in front of you is a shrine, and inside that shrine is a steel chest. Within that chest is the original Roll of Honour. For those of you who are under 12, to commemorate the marriage of James IV of Scotland to Margaret Tudor. Sadly though, James IV is killed a year later at the Battle of Flodden, so the hall was not used nearly as much as it was intended, especially since his own son, James V, he was a little bit of a spoiled brat. He didn't like coming to the castle, he thought it was cold, he thought it was drafty. He much preferred the luxury and the warmth of Holyrood Palace down the other end of the Royal Mile. Now, if we jump forward in history to Christmas Day 1650, that is when Oliver Cromwell arrives at Edinburgh Castle, and Cromwell is here with an agenda. He is here to get rid of anything that remains of the monarchy at that time. So he marches into the Great Hall, rips out the insides, puts in 2 floors, and he turns it into another soldier's barracks. He also puts a false ceiling on the inside to cover the roof, but in actual fact he has done us a favour, because when you go into the Great Hall, be sure to look directly up, and you will realise that you are looking at the original hammer beam roof still standing from 1512. Now, all hammer beam means is that when this roof was first constructed, all the beams are hammered into place with wooden pegs. There is no metalwork involved whatsoever in the construction of that roof. So think of IKEA 500 years ago, that's how the roof was built. But it was also built by the local shipbuilders, which is why when you go to have a look at it, you'll realise that if you were to flip it upside down, you'll notice that it resembles the bottom of a boat as well. After all this though, we then get the Victorians, and the Victorians have a notorious reputation for taking something that is already old and trying to make it look even older. A lot of times they will ruin things or they will confuse historians, but we will let them off with the Great Hall. Because when you go inside, you'll see there is wood-carved panellings, there are swords, there are suits of armour. They are all real. It's very important to remember that they are all real, it's just they were put there by the Victorians. So what you see on the inside is the Victorian idea of what they thought a Great Hall would have looked like back in its day.
这网都是个平平的。
Bal. Het kon een stenen bal van 150 kilo.
好，快点，最近到不到？手上多少钱？我想做一个。
然后这个就是它的对勋章，没不是啊，这个是电。我没有说。
真的，你军章。
没有啊，因为我几年8级嘛。没有，我说再加2个考试的时候。
Seem to be coming to Edinburgh. I see it everywhere I go these last few months as president. Our navy has had much success, so there is an urgent need for more.
Néant point été appliqué à la lettre, Monsieur Marais?
Monsieur Howard, comment le saurais-je? Je ne suis pas. Je sais seulement qu'on lui donne de l'argent.
4 ounces of butter and 6 ounces of cheese once a week. I forgot, sir.
Votre plainte n'est pas recevable.
Préféreriez-vous que je vous quittasse?
Paolo, noi ce ne andiamo.
Si vede la ruota,
Aspetta.
Vamos a casa, toma. Sí, yo no lo dejo.
Corre, mira, mira, ahora, papá, corre, mira. Papá. Mira.
Coffee issue.
Could be.
I know Natalie doesn't. She doesn't drink coffee. She's afraid she doesn't drink coffee with life. When I first
Don't headbutt that. Oh, there's one running down the hill.
Going down for a drink.
After 200 yards, turn left, B709, Troquaire Road.
She was an artist, but whether that was true or whether she just wanted money. Because there's another one further down and he was
turn left. Follow B709, Troquaire Road, for 14 miles.
church.
Because even like rock melons and things like that, they say smell them, but they all smell the same. Yeah. Poor old avocado, you go and some desserts were even better. You can go in there and just have all the desserts. Yeah, really. Because if you go to a coffee shop and get a slice of cake, yes, it was rude to the other people, wasn't it?
Yeah. All over the girl wanted egg Benedict, didn't she? Egg Benedict. Which is what? Yes, 20 years between visits and I've got it to the shop. Clearly couldn't give a shit about anyone else.
Oh, she's a bit puffed up.
I think he'd pull over. So
Well, they could pull over, couldn't
There's plenty of
they?
room.
I don't know why the postman doesn't
Well,
pull.
he probably can't move either. He's like us.
If they want to have an argument about it, he should move over so
Start blowing the horn like they do in Canada,
so
don't
he
they?
can get through.
Why I mean, it's only a little bump, so why can't they move over?
Because she looks, well, she looks feral for a start.
He's in the car.
She does look a bit feral, doesn't she?
I'd just go.
Got that sort of hungry look about her. I
Yeah,
haven't
the
either.
headlights are on
smiling?
there. Headlights are on there.
Who knows if she's smiling? She's got one of those faces that the mouth starts at her ears, eh? No, someone's getting out the back now.
You know, she's going to tell him all about it.
Just start
She's
blowing
very
the horn.
inconsiderate, isn't she?
No, she's feral. Have a look at the head on it, like a racing.
Yeah, I was just driving along and I was just on the wrong side of the road for a minute. Next thing, this clown took all the branches off the tree and hit me mirror. Bastard.
Have a look at the head. Like a racing wombat. Anyone want to have do a pee before I get going?
Let's get your camera off there.
Yeah, but she knew what it was.
Well, it's going to fall when we go. I'm sure we went through Lockerbie.
One of the main.
Go right on the roundabout, third exit, then turn left. Please leave the roundabout at that first exit. Go around the roundabout, 4th exit. After 200 yards, go around the roundabout, 3rd exit, B7068, Glasgow Road. Go around the roundabout, 3rd exit. Turn half right.
Shall I Google it?
Yeah.
Have you found it yet?
You might find it at that antique shop we just went past.
Absolutely.
Russ, just give me that. Should thumb over the screen, mate. Okay.
I thought it landed in houses.
Let's have a look.
Your destination is on the right. Bear right, then sharp left.
This is the cemetery.
Well, I wonder if they've...
Oh, it's just... Yeah.
After 300 yards, turn left, A709, Dumfries Road, then turn right.
Turn right onto A709,
Turn left, then turn right.